Welcome to those of you who are joining. Just before we kick off formally, we're going to start with a quick video. Just having a second loading this video, and then we will get things started.
Having tools that allow you to better understand your operations and make more data-driven decisions will give companies an edge.
If we want to make a bigger impact, then we're going to go and understand people's behavior.
If the tool works and it enables you to do your job more efficiently, it will get adopted.
With so many people being inundated by technology and information, what wave do you jump on?
I think it's really important that we, as an industry, open up and be much more collaborative about the solutions that we apply.
Now is the time to create better, build better, and be better.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Joy, Executive Director of ULI Toronto, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all to today's session, Alexandra Park, Community Vision, Globally Recognized. Most of you are tuning in because you've heard the announcement that last month, Alex Park was named a winner of the Urban Land Institute's 2021 Global Awards for Excellence, only one of 3 North American projects to be honored. And today's program is seeking to recount what we're referring to as the origin story of this unique community vision that is literally unfolding in front of us. So super excited. As a Toronto-based organization, we acknowledge that the land that we are meeting on, albeit virtually, is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation or generations past. ULI stands in solidarity with the Indigenous communities demanding action and accountability for the ongoing legacy of the residential school system. ULI stands we'd also like to acknowledge, and honor those who've come here involuntarily, particularly descendants from those who've brought here through enslavement. To better understand the meaning behind this land acknowledgement, we recommend 4 programs that we have uploaded to YouTube, and we'll put the links in the chat for you. 13,000 Years of Indigenous History in the GTA and Why It Matters to Planning and Development, Whose Law and Whose Land and Whose Law, Indigenous Toronto, the stories our city paved over, and Colonialism, Enslavement, and Abolition in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Everybody will be automatically muted throughout the session to avoid audio interference. Closed captioning is available for this session, and you can access it via the button along the bottom of your Zoom platform. If you have any questions, and we encourage them, please use the Q&A function and/or upvote those questions by pressing the thumbs up button. This is a recorded session. The recording will be sent to you after the session. And if you want to take the conversation online, please use the handle @ULI_Toronto or the hashtag #AskGreatQuestions. Today's event and all other ULI program quite literally would not be possible without the support of our annual sponsors. I would like to say a major thank you to all of them for their support. Now more than ever, ULI Toronto relies on the support of our sponsors who enable us to put on the quality program we do and drive our mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. Again, to all of them, we say thank you. Quick note here, and we'll put this link on the chat as well. But our head office in Washington has decided that the Canadian membership dues are ready for an increase, a pretty significant one, in fact. You are able, though, as a member, no matter when you became a member, at what time of the year, to renew in advance of October 1st and lock in on the historically low Canadian prices. So encourage all members, no matter, even if you just became one, to renew before October 1st into the future, even if the anniversary date's a year out, and you'll get those lower rates. So little PSA there. Okay, now into the program. And to get us started, and we've decided we're gonna cut down all introductions to basically the name of who the person is speaking, and we'll put a little bit of bio information again into the chat. So to start us off with, to give us a little bit of an orientation of what the project is and the award submission that garnered this great moment. Michelle Trocme, partner at Urban Strategies Inc. Michelle, that's all the introduction I'm giving you. Over to you.
Thank you, Richard. And Denise, if we could go to the next slide, thank you. Going to give you a little bit of background on Alexandra Park before we get into this conversation. And we can move to the next slide, please. I think most of you joining us today are familiar with Alexandra Park and its location, but it's surprising how many people aren't. Even though it's so close to our downtown and to our waterfront, to Dundas Street West and Spadina Avenue, it's slightly shielded or screened from its immediate context, which has been something which has been one of the issues that Alexandra Park has faced, but also a tremendous opportunity. One of the reasons why the community has remained so strong over the past generations. Next slide, please. So you can see here in plan view with Dundas Street to the north and Spadina to the east and Queen Street West, how much part of the city fabric Alexandra Park is, and yet slightly at a remove. This is an 18-acre site located between Kensington Market, Chinatown, and Queen Street West neighborhoods, so a very vibrant part of the city, and it is well served by transit along all of the spines that I've just mentioned. Next one, please. One of the things that makes Alexandra Park so special is its socioeconomic makeup and history of community activism. A significant amount of the residents are first-generation Canadians, about 2,500 residents within a mixed income living in rent-geared to income units, and a strong, very strong history of community activism. Next slide, please. So the scope for this project is huge, but I'll just focus on three pieces of it. One is that this is similar to other revitalizations that have occurred that TCHC has been leading. It's going to be mixed use. It's going to continue to be mixed income and include housing for mixed income tenants. One of the objectives here was to create a safer, healthier, and more welcoming environment, more and better knit into its surrounding fabric. And then one of the key aspects of how we delivered this and how we continue to talk about Alexandra Park is it's all about consensus-based planning for the housing residents. Next slide, please. So the process from the early days, which is almost 14 years ago, focused heavily on community engagement with all sorts of different kinds of events, different types of things such as barbecues and workshops and town halls and things of that nature, with simultaneous translation from a number of different language groups. We also were keen to make sure that youth were involved as part of this, the evolution of the vision for Alexandra Park. So we had a youth strategy symposium and a number of different events around that. Next slide, please. I'm not going to get into the details of the guiding principles that came out of all of this, except to say, and Colleen will touch on this a little bit later, that the first principle and the one that makes Alexandra Park so distinctive and different is the principle of zero displacement. In other words, none of the existing residents need to leave the community in order to facilitate this revitalization. And as you can well expect, that is something that is a bit of a challenge because it means that you have to do a very careful dance, if you will, in terms of the phasing in order to ensure, and it's much slower, but it's in the end, revitalizations such as this are all about the community and not so much about the actual bricks and mortar of a project like this. Next slide, please. I won't get into the details of the design goals, except to say that thinking about design was also an important component in our conversations with the city, with the community, whether it was about building typologies or the role and nature of the open space, or the kinds of relationships between market housing and community housing. All of that was part of the conversation, ensuring that at the end of the day, we were protecting that sense of community, improving access, creating a better community facilities, and creating a safer and more comfortable, greener environment. Next slide, please. So what you can see now that phase one is complete is already the beginning of the DNA, if you will, of what will make Alexandra Park a mix of mid-rise and townhouse forms, a mix of market and affordable housing. In the fullness of time, a brand new community recreational center, and a number of other things that really reinforce the vibrancy of the community and ensure that there are all sorts of economic opportunities. And finally, prioritizing pedestrian mobility, and really that sense that moving people is what's important through a community like Alexandra Park, as opposed to just moving cars. So next slide, please. Finally, before passing this on to the next speakers, I just want to speak a little bit about the award that we've just won, which is a global award from the Urban Land Institute. And there's two aspects to that, which we should all be proud of. And when I say all, beginning with the community, the residents, the various stakeholders who were involved from the community, and of course, the development community, the TCHC, and all of the various consultants who facilitated bringing us to where we are now. So the first one is that this is an award in the category of excellence in equitable development. And Alexandra Park speaks to something which is really quite special, not just in Toronto, but globally. It's the way Alexandra Park is being revitalized, regenerated, is something that many cities, communities around the world can learn from. The second aspect of this award is it's the result of overall excellence, including a number of different components. I'll speak to the one primary one, which is achievements in community partnership. But you can see further on a number of other aspects which really were used to judge Alexandra Park against a number of very, very strong contenders from around the world. And with that, I will pass it on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Michelle. It's Richard Joy again, and I'm going to introduce our moderator. But it is truly the achievements in community partnership that is at the center of this program, and quite frankly, it's the part that I think makes us the most proud of this project. I think it's one of the pieces of the submission that really had it stand out from all the many global submissions made. So it's appropriate then that we bring in Lori to steer us through two panels. She's got a lot to do. There's a community panel, and you're going to hear from some of the community members who are at the heart of the origin story, and then a community partners panel, including Michelle and Urban Strategies. One of the community partners won't be joining us today, unfortunately. Federal politics heated up, I guess, as we might have expected. So Adam Baum won't be joining us today, or if he does, he'll be at very tail end. But he's in Ottawa leading a media panel right now. So, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lori Payne, the Executive Vice President of Development at Osmington Jarofsky Development, the new company, a new role, but she's had great history and she'll speak a little bit to that as well. Lori, over to you.
Thanks, Richard. We're already going to call it OG Development because it's a mouthful. Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for having me. I want to jump right into the panel, but I'll just say that one of the first projects I worked on in my planning career at Urban Strategies was the Alexandra Park development, and it literally changed the course of my career. I went on to work at Toronto Community Housing, but more importantly, I think for me and for anybody else who's been close to this project, it fundamentally changed the way I practice city building and my understanding of the role of community in decision making and making great places. And that's really a tribute to the people that live there, because you really don't know AP and the AP revitalization unless you know the community that lives there. So without further ado, maybe we can bring up the next slide and introduce our esteemed community members panel. So we have Colleen Lavalle, Marwa El Dardiri, Diane Williams, Duran Grant, and sorry, my screen is blocked, Dolores Pien. So welcome all. We really look forward to hearing from you. And so what we're going to do quickly is spend a few minutes getting to know our community panel members. So we'll give them each a moment to share their experience and their insights into the Alexandra Park revitalization. Colleen, why don't you take it away?
Colleen, you're on mute.
I realize that, sorry. I'm just going to speak a little bit about how we started and what we desired and some of the outcomes we've gotten in the early stages. So in the beginning, there was a real need in the community center. I was on the community center board at the time, and there was structural concerns. And we called our city councilor in to talk to him about it. And it led into there's a lot of community centers downtown. It wouldn't be easy to get council approval for just a community center. But we also talked about the fact that if this is the condition that the community center is in, what's the condition of the homes? And maybe we need to look at reinvesting in everything. And so unlike other revitalizations that TCH does, we were not on their list of potential communities to be revitalized. And as well, not even on the city's radar either until the councillor got involved. And so the councillor dealt with that. We also had to deal with the community. This is a community that has been here since the late 60s. But even many members who moved in the late 60s were part of the community before this community got built. It was derelict cottage type buildings that were torn down. So they went from living there to living in this community. And so a lot of people were afraid of change, and we really needed to reassure people that we were going to keep this community together, the strengths, the advocacy, the connection. This has always been a community that's been involved civically. And so the idea of being split up like the way Regent Park was, where people were dispersed throughout the city, was not good. And so the concept of zero displacement came in. It was really important, and the other guiding principles as well were very important in terms of getting the community on board and not having the rest of the community on board and not having resistance. So it came up in different ways. For instance, typically the streets in Toronto are named after different colonial last names that have been around for a long time. We had a new street created, and it was named for a resident that had passed. His family was still living here, and he contributed a lot to the community, and it was called Paul Lane Gardens. So today, when you walk in our neighborhood, you walk by a name that is familiar, that means something to the neighborhood, and that does things. We also focused on employment, and you're going to hear from other people about the successes we've had through that. And so ultimately, that's what we've been doing, and that's how we've been really impacting the design and so forth and so on. So that's my turn.
Well, we're so glad that you took the initiative on the community center, Colleen, and it's incredible what it's led to. Thank you. Mara, why don't you pick it up from here?
Thank you. Yeah, so I was just gonna touch on the importance of a true resident-led planning process and quickly highlight a bit about that. So a resident-led planning process is one where the people who live in the neighborhood decide what they want their future community to look like, but more importantly, what they want it to be like. So as residents, this meant it would consist of our own ideas, desires, input, and work, but also clear communication and the willingness to collaborate with external individuals and groups that also serve or intend to serve the community. Because we understood that, it allowed us to say yes to new things that would bring about positive change, but also no to any changes that would be negative for the community, and all within reason. It was important that the residents did not feel hopeless, rather a sense of control over what the future of their neighborhood would look like and be like. So for us, that meant a belief system and the creation of guiding principles, which Colleen touched on, that stemmed from the belief system, coupled with strong will and persistence throughout the entire process. I want to share a quick and impactful story because I still have a vivid picture of this conversation. It was a conversation I had with one of the youth at the beginning of the planning process when word of the revitalization of Alexandra Park had got around, following that of Regent Park's revitalization. And Colleen also touched on the perception that people had in the neighborhood, and this story touches on it as well. I was around 22 and the youth was around 16. We were walking in Kensington Market down the street, and he told me that the revitalization meant that we would all get kicked out of our houses and relocated all over the city, just like what happened with Regent Park. I assured him that it wouldn't be this way because we as residents would decide how it would be done. He continued to explain that we wouldn't be the ones to decide, and that the power was with the city, housing, and developers, and that it would be pointless for us to fight against anything they had decided for us because they had far more power and they were going to do things their way and in a way that served their bottom line. I confidently assured him that there is power in unity, and as long as we made it a priority and stuck together, which again, Colleen touched on that, as long as we stuck together on it until the end, we could make sure no one is displaced from the neighborhood. So it was ultimately on us in ensuring that it would happen. And it was the belief that it could and would happen that fueled the will and persistence to see it until the end. So we made zero displacement the #1 guiding principle, as we've been shown previously a couple times now. And it wasn't convenient for the planning process, but it was extremely important to us as residents and not something we were willing to compromise on. So here we are over 10 years later, and not one resident was displaced from the neighborhood unless they came and approached and asked to be moved to a location which they were happier with. So as my mother taught me and showed me time and time again, where there is a will, there is a way. And when it came to zero displacement, she, along with everyone else, once again, she led by example. So this story is just one example of the importance of the role of the residents and the role they played in shaping the entire revitalization. It's that same mentality, energy, engagement, persistence, and strong will that made this process about the people that live in the community, ensuring that the physical aspects of the revitalization met their needs, like basements and backyards, but more importantly, beyond buildings, that the revitalization was about the people who live there and all the aspects of their lives. That's it for me.
Marwa, what a fantastic story. It really strikes me that you were just a youth of 22, giving that advice to a 16-year-old youth and leading by example yourself, just as your mother did. Really, obviously had a huge impact on where the community is today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we are at Diane next. Welcome, Diane. The floor is yours.
Wow, how am I going to top up that what Marwa and Colleen? I'll try my best. Okay, my name is Diane Williams. I have lived in the Atkinson Co-op for the past 28 years. I am also a board member, the vice president of the Alexandra Park Community Center. I became a part of the revitalization working group in the early days when it was referred to as the Visioning Committee, which was formed by TCHC politicians and the residents. The first community economic development initiative that was connected to the revitalization and which will be an example for the future. There were three components. Number one, there was a need to cater dinner as these meetings took place after work. Number two, we provide small contribution to the community center's programming. Number three, the residents who catered the meals was given a token of appreciation for their work. This was well received by the people in attendance, and the catering was expanded due to the request from TCHC Tridel City Hall community centers in the east and northwest of the city. The residents who catered the dinner all had their food handler certificate, which gave us the motivation to go to George Brown and obtain our culinary certificate, which was sponsored by Tridel. Due to the many compliments of how great the food was and having close conversation with Adam Vaughan and others, we wanted to bring the community together and at the same time add a pinch of attitude to it. And there the Culinary Divas was born. This is another example of community leadership and engagement in Alexandra Park. As one of the original caterers and leader of the Culinary Divas, this opportunity gave me
Looks like we have a little bit of an audio problem, Laurie.
Yeah, Deanne, hopefully we can get your audio back up and running, and certainly appreciate your efforts with the Culinary Divas. I've had many a meal in Alex Park, and I certainly recommend it to all to take advantage of that, the offering they have there. So I think we are at Duran next. Welcome, Duran.
Hi, thank you very much. Thanks for welcoming me. So I'm here today to touch on the pre-employment and employment piece that came about as a result of this revitalization. To connect the dots, there are a few points that Marwa touched on that link the situation of employment with the fight for what we as residents wanted out of this revitalization and what we ended up getting. So just start from the very beginning. Marwa was a part of, well, I was a part of the group that Marwa did mention. And my goal was to change the lives of youth within our community. At the time, I was a acting member of our board of directors for the co-op, an employee at the community center, and additionally, one of the voices for youth rights within the community. One of the aspects that we focused on at the community center was pre-employment. However, the issues that we were facing were that we can teach the youth all the skills that they needed. However, finding the opportunity was a difficult part. That is where our group saw what was happening in Regent Park and decided to raise our voices to make sure that we had better opportunities than what the residents of Regent Park had mentioned that they had. Moving forward, working with TCHC and Adam Vaughn, Adam Vaughn being one of the leading drivers to make sure that these employment needs came into play. And with TCHC finding the right developer to assist with these employment needs and develop the community, we reached a point where our pre-employment work became successful in employment work. So as a result, myself, I am one of the youth who was able to reap the benefits of the employment brought forward by Tridel, which is a company I am currently employed for. But not only myself, I've seen, going to work, I see individuals in so many different professions, from project management to customer care in construction. I've seen youth being brought into unions, and the great part about it is that it didn't just end there. There's been mentorship. There has been guidance. Specifically with myself, I've received ample guidance to be able to maneuver and move throughout the company. And I'd just like to say it is very great to see Adam's dream and TCHC's hard work come to fruition through the process of this revitalization and this community led initiative. So that's my piece. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you, Duran. A very important piece. I think building the buildings, even though that's what I do, is the easy part of the revitalization, and the economic development that you've all worked so hard at is by far the hardest. So great to see you being awarded for that. Dolores, last but not least, please go ahead.
Well, I'm Dolores Pan, and I'm a registered interior designer, and I've been living in this 20 Vanali and the Queen Street West community for over 35 years now. Never saw a need to move. And so with respect to economic development, what I've been able to do is, as an independent designer, working at renovating 20 Vanali Street as part of the renovation. So I came through Alexandra Park community through the Toronto housing, city home housing. And then having been able to work on my building, the renovations of my building, and being on those committees, and then seamlessly slipped into the Alexandra Park working community. And so, and then part of that economic development program. So what occurred was that as a result of that and knowing about the opportunities and being somewhat tenacious as well, I've had a chance to, as I mentioned, be part of the 20 Vanoli renovations and also do some staging of the 2 townhomes, one on Vanoli Street and then the other one on Augusta. And what the staging did was, with the help of Tridel, we used their aged out furniture and for their developments, and managed to use them for Alexandra Park townhouses so that everybody would get a sense of, sure, it's a small space, but this is what we can do with this great small space. And then the furniture was donated to the community or Habitat for Humanity or a furniture bank. So as a result of this and building up that part of my portfolio, again, as an independent interior designer and with her own small firm, I am now able to seriously, and I have approached several architectural firms, but I am able now to join TEPL architects in order to be part of the RFP process for the community center and the adjoining apartment co-op building. So I'm really thrilled about that. That's a recent development. Again, it's and then Adam has always been very encouraging to myself and as well as all of us, and kept telling me, just keep persevering and it all takes time. And that's what I've done. I've persevered and it has taken time, but I couldn't be happier with where I live. I was facing a parking lot and was quite happy seeing, having an unobstructed view from the 6th floor. And now I look at these beautiful condo development, SQ across the street. So I'm even happier. And these beautiful townhomes, like who knew? As I mentioned, I was facing a parking lot and I was happy with that. And I was always happy with the Queen West community. But now that I've, and then Adam encouraged everyone from this building to feel as a part of the integrated Alexandra Park community, I'm even happier. And the working group meetings have been lots of fun. As a daughter of an immigrant, I see other immigrants trying to accomplish the same things that I grew up with as well. So I couldn't be happier living here. I don't see myself going anywhere anytime soon. So it's been lots of fun and I'm very thankful for the opportunity. Thank you, and speaking and expressing here as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Dolores. Your enthusiasm is infectious, and I think we're hearing that from all the community panel members, and I want to thank you for sharing each of your stories. They really are incredible and really give an insight into why this award was granted, really to you, the community. We are going to come back in the Q&A panel to each of you. And maybe if I could ask you while you're listening to the other speakers to think about what surprised you most coming out of this process over the last 10 years and what you're most proud of. And we'll come back and hear from you on those two things. And in the interest of time, we'll switch to panel number 2. Our guests today are getting a 2-for-1 special with 2 fantastic panels. So I'd like to introduce William Mendez, Director of Program Delivery within the Development Division at Toronto Community Housing, Brian Sherwood, Senior Manager of Development at Tridel, and Michelle Trocme, who you've already met, will also join us in the Q&A panel. So William, can you talk a little bit about your experience, and maybe you can share with us as well your perspective on the origin story, as Richard called it at the beginning. Over to you.
Well, I'd just like to thank the community residents that have shared their stories, and that is just like a short little snapshot of how powerful the story is in Alexandra Park. In the beginning of this process, there was a lot of community advocacy, there was a lot of conversations that took place, but a very important approach that we took was we didn't approach this strictly from a planning perspective. We actually started community engagement with a program that we called Recipe for Community at the time. And in that, we got to have community conversations about food security, about beautification, We created, we worked with the community to create a youth documentary. We upgraded like small spaces like the basketball court and created murals, and also created a recipe book, which helped bring the community together and really celebrate the different cultures that were there in Alexandra Park. And it's a very, very diverse community. And that helped us work together and helped us practice to make decisions together as well in something that wasn't as scary, you know. And through those relationships, we were then better able to transition into a conversation and decision-making process around revitalization. And we couldn't have done it without the help and advocacy of the community. We had community animators that were resident leaders that helped us throughout the process to engage people. And what I mean by engage people is not just by inviting them to meetings. There were conversations that took place at people's doorsteps, in their backyards. There was small like tea parties in backyards. I remember we met people from, you know, TCHC and the planning community. We met people where they're at. And one of the things that everyone learned was this wasn't just a redevelopment. This was a real revitalization where we got to work with residents who ultimately will live and help design the homes and places that we built. And that was very, very important. It's what makes our revitalization programs very special. So in that, we had the opportunity to work with the community. And Marwa touched on the concept of the right to say no, but an opportunity to say yes. At one point in the decision-making process, we actually went out to the community and presented 5 different options, where it was different scales of redevelopment, and it was like building on parking lots. And if we built only on parking lots, we would be able to perhaps get a new community center and rebuild or repair some of the social housing. And the scales changed. And there was also an option to do nothing. And literally gave the community the opportunity to say no to the revitalization. And how that happened was animators went out door to door and spoke with people and received their response. And through that, we were able to gauge whether the community was comfortable and gave us the authority to actually proceed with the revitalization based on the vision that they had. And there's so much over there. It's such a powerful story in terms of truly collaborating with residents. But another thing that I also just wanted to touch on in terms of the early stages was the community wanted more than just new homes. And they wanted a community that was connected, that opened out to their adjacent neighbors in Chinatown and Kensington Market and Queen Street West. But they also wanted to leverage those relationships to create sustainable job opportunities and business opportunities for their community. And through Adam Vaughn's leadership and support, we were also able to secure funding for a community retail space, as well as tenant-focused business incubation opportunities, which at that time was not part of the planning agenda. Like that, now we call it community wealth building or community benefits, but this was like 12 years ago. This was like the vision that was being brought forth through the community. And that's why I say it's like very special, because Alexandra Park's vision was way ahead of the game in terms of planning and redevelopment, especially like in 2009 and 10, we were talking about like a long-term economic sustainability. And there's just so much that has happened. And that's what I want to say on that topic. But it was very, very important to also work with the Alexandra Park Community Center. A big shout out to Donna Harrow, who was an integral part of this process as well. And we had the opportunity to work with the Alexandra Park Residents Association and the Atkinson Housing Co-op. So it wasn't just like, there was actual formal entities that were part of this process as well, and really helped shape and provide power to the community to ensure that they had a strong voice throughout the process.
Thanks, Will. I love that food was kind of, and gathering as community were, you know, the center point of bringing people together. It seems like a simple idea, but really innovative at the time, and probably something we realize we've taken for granted over the last couple of years. So thank you for all your hard work on that. Brian, tell us what it's like being a developer in all of this.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's probably appropriate that I'm going last and saying the least in a conversation about the origin story, because when we were invited to the table to be a part of this community, there was so much work done in advance. There was a robust community engagement. There was an award-winning master plan that was drafted, and really our role was to come in and fill in the responsibility of bringing the buildings and the construction into place. And the origin story of Alexandra Park also is an origin story for Tridel in the way that we engage communities and build for people, and not just rely on our talents as putting up bricks and mortar. We learned a ton about how to engage communities, create livable spaces that are appropriate for people. We typically don't have the opportunity to develop homes for people who are already living in a community. Our normal process is allowing people to buy into communities. And this was a complete transformation of the way that we do business and we continue to do business. And we've learned a lot from the strong residents associations and groups that support Alexandra Park and the Atkinson Co-op. And we have changed how we build because in revitalization spaces. Some of the comments that Marwa made relating to zero displacement and construction, those have like financial implications. So in other revitalizations, we've seen the demolition, the raising of hundreds of homes at one time, but with this principle of zero displacement, we were forced to think creatively and find ways to demolish 30 homes and disconnect their services and make sure that services are maintained for the homes around them. So the community engagement and the support from the community, I had ramifications that led to a stronger sense of community during the revitalization process, but they also had financial impacts that we as the developer and TCHC had to adjust to. And I think because of our ability to be flexible and the community's ability to work with us, we've created something that is worthy of global recognition. And I think I'm going to cut it there so we can have some time for Q&A.
Thanks, Brian. I really think you touched on a theme where everybody had to, and I think Mara raised this as well, be a little bit flexible through the process. You know, things come up you don't expect, but also that there are choices to be made and trade-offs. And I know that the financial viability of the project was a part of the Award of Excellence program, and you know, a real success that the community brought in bringing this revitalization to life, but also in TCHC and Tridel in delivering it and making it a reality. So I am going to bring in the community panel as well, but Michelle, I'll give you a quick 30 seconds maybe on kind of your insights in planning a community such as Alex Park, and then just know you're between us and the community members. So
yes, only to say that as a number of people have mentioned, one of the lessons from Alexandra Park, and certainly this is one that I've taken to heart, is that communities and their revitalization is about the soft social tissue of the community and understanding the dynamics of a community from a number of different perspectives. So often we tend to focus on the physical form, the bricks and mortar, as a number have mentioned. And as a designer, you know, I love to talk about buildings and how they relate to each other and create great spaces. But at the end of the day, the success of Alexandra Park is about community. And as you said, Lori, it's also about getting the financials to pencil in, and Tridel was able with working with TCH to make this a success story from that perspective.
Thank you. I'm going to dive right into the questions because we have about 10 minutes before we wrap up here, and I'm seeing some questions show up in the chat for the community panel as well, so we'll turn to those. I wanted to start with a question for Colleen. When we were preparing for this session, you talked about that Alexandra Park was sort of a gated community, but gated in a way to keep people in rather than to keep people out. And I wonder if you can speak to whether or not you're starting to see that change through this process. One, through the engagement of the community, but and also in the physical transformation. Oh,
Yep.
hit that mute button. Yeah.
Yes, very definitely. So yeah, as Lori said, it is a gated community. You can't have cars driving through in its original, like, we're not talking about the part that's redeveloped anymore, but in its original design, you couldn't drive cars through it. You were gated, but you were, you know, like I moved into the neighborhood as an adult, right? So I'm not like I'm still considered new, and I moved in the year 2000. So, and I'm still considered a new resident. So I noticed soon after I moved in that it wasn't just that these were gates, that we're 2 blocks away from the AGO, and so many of the youth and children here have never been to the Art Gallery of Ontario, have never been there. We are close to the financial district, but we get no benefits that the financial district has in it. We are close to the retail on Queen West. It's basically like an outdoor mall. Almost anything any store that you could see in a mall is on Queen West, but our youth are not working there. You know, they have kids from North York working in their stores, and we're right around the corner. So I noticed that it wasn't like, I just started to notice that it's like really compressing people inside and not letting them experience their city in probably just it's probably just psychological, like you just don't feel connected to the rest of the community. The street that I mentioned when I was speaking, Pauline Gardens, connects between 2 outward streets and connects to a Venali where 20 Venali is on, and between Cameron and Augusta. So now it's more open up. And also with the condo buildings being there, you know, you have a mixed community. You have, it doesn't look one way or the other. It's more mixed and integrated. And our hope, especially once we have the community center, the new community center built, is to really massage those relationships and really, so for instance, somebody who's living in a condo might be a mentor to a youth in the neighborhood, or you know, like just those, open up those opportunities. So that's what it's really about. And I think it starts from childhood. Like I said, the children cross one street to go to school, and some of these kids graduate grade 8 without having gone any further in their city. Yeah.
Well, I haven't yet walked down Paul Lane, but I certainly will, and I encourage others to do that. A real symbol of the communities connecting out and connecting to each other. Marwa, I'm going to start with you and one of the questions from the Q&A panel, but I also was hoping maybe if you know, what is the plan for the community center that Colleen mentioned? A new one is coming, and what is that, and what does it mean to the community? So I'll ask that as question 1. And then one of the chat room questions is looking for your advice for other communities that want to go through similar redevelopment. And I'll ask Duran to chime in on that one as well. So over to you, Marwa. First on that, maybe give us a status on the community center, and then give us your sage advice.
Okay, so maybe Duran could speak better to the status of the community center, or somebody else, because I haven't been around lately. So I was born in Alexandra Park, and I lived there for the first 25 years of my life, but I'm now in the 30s. So I get a lot of information about what's going on from my mother, but I cannot speak firsthand as to what's going on currently with the community center. I wouldn't be the right person. But in terms of advice to other areas undergoing revitalization, I guess it's like tied in with life advice. and I mentioned it earlier, not to feel hopeless as to what your future would look like. So if you're in a neighborhood and this neighborhood is being revitalized, really to have desires and know that those desires could become a reality. So I guess, like I touched on earlier, the hope and the belief and the understanding that what you want and what you need can become a reality. So as long as you have that mentality and mindset, and you're willing to work with other people, you can make anything happen. And that's what the zero displacement was extremely inconvenient for the planning process, like I mentioned. And a lot of other things when we spoke to them, I guess, like financially or the time it would take, and because everybody has their ideas of how they want the process to look. And a lot of the things residents wanted was inconvenient. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a resident, you're a stakeholder, and you need to look out for yourself and other residents, because somebody from TCHC knows what they have to do. They know who they have to report back to. The city knows what it's trying to do. Everybody has a role to play, and everybody knows what they have to do. At the end of the day, I could sit there and say what would TCHC want and what would make it easier for them, or what would the developer want. But that's not your job as a resident or somebody who's living there. Your job is to firmly understand and look out for what you need and what you want as a resident, and be strong in that position. So that's the advice I would give. Think as a resident, live as a resident, and say yes to what you need, and look out for what you need as I forget, sorry, I don't know, Dolores? Yes, as what she said, she went out there, she has skills, and she made sure that if you're coming into my community to revitalize my community, I'm going to be a designer because I have the skills and this is my neighborhood and I need to be the one designing this community. So like that type of mentality, I would say everybody look out for yourself. Duran made sure he got a job. Look out for yourself, hold people accountable, and get what you need, make sure it's what you want it to be. That's my advice.
Fantastic advice. Duran, you want to chime in with your advice and you speak to the community center or not? It's up to you.
Okay, so the community center aspect, I probably think that William might be a better person to speak to that. He'd have all the updates as to where it is. I know there's been a few conversations, and the process and the planning for it has changed. So William would be the best person to address that. In terms of advice, I would just advise to make the process as all-inclusive as possible. There's so many voices out there that typically aren't heard. Typically what you get is a certain age bracket with a certain education level or a certain popularity within the community that would be sitting on the panels and being a part of the discussions. With the process that we went through between TCHC and Adam Vaughn's office, they made sure to include, well, part of it is that we fought to be included in it, but they made sure that they included youth, parents, seniors, because there's so many aspects that can and will be missed. There's so many things that one demographic is not going to think about for another demographic. So, in terms of planning, if you're building a community not only for those who live there, but for people who are going to come in the future, people who are going to have kids in the future. So the input of those who are in those demographics at the time will assist with making a better community.
100%. Well said. We are at 12:59, so there are a number of questions in the chat that we won't get to immediately, but maybe there's a way of following up separately, Richard. And I'm going to give the last word to Dolores, I think, and really, give us your advice or something that came out of the process that really surprised you. You've got the last word with the whole crowd here, Dolores. So over to you.
Thank you for that honor. Being tenacious, being aware, and also being tuned into what is available, but actually following up on what's available. And when I say tenacious, I mean tenacious, phone calls, emails, the whole thing. And what surprised me is that I am just so much enjoying the Alexandra Park working group meetings. I find them fun. I find them informative. And I really miss being fed, quite frankly, when we were meeting in person. Because as an Italian who knows about it, loves Italian food, I've had some of the best lasagna at those meetings ever, like 2-3 helpings worth, which I had to watch. So for me, that's been the biggest surprises, how much fun it's been and how sincere and how smart and thoughtful everybody has been and is continually, and passionate about the community that they've been. So those are my impassioned parting words. It's been so much fun.
Perfect impassioned parting words. Thank you, Dolores. And so many thanks to our panelists, particularly our community panelists. There's so much more to this story, and you know, maybe there can be a phase 2 story, Richard, at some point that we can keep going with this.
I think it's safe to say that this story has not been fully told, and frankly, it's still unfolding. I know that my colleagues have put up some upcoming ULI events that people can look at, but just as we're at time, I want to echo, Lori, your thanks to everybody. There is going to be another big international moment coming in just under 2 years, actually March of 2023. There's going to be a global conference of the Urban Land Institute, and I can assure you there's going to be tremendous interest. So if you see a bunch of people storming through your neighborhood, we'll give you advance warning. In fact, we'll get you on the platform to tell the story. But there's a lot of people watching this. The story is bigger than Toronto. It's bigger than the Greater Toronto Area. It is a North American, in fact, it's a global story. So congratulations to all of you for being part of it. We are over time, so with a brutal ending, with more to come. Thank you and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.